Hola, bonjour, and hello everyone. I want to begin today by acknowledging that Global Toronto is coming to you from the Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. In particular, we want to acknowledge the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples who have made both in shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. In particular, we also recognize our collective responsibility in supporting justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across our country. Miigwech. My name is Mercedes Caxaj. I am the Artistic Co-Director of Sunfest London Committee for Cross-Cultural Arts, a nonprofit cultural organization based in London, Ontario, Canada, with a strong mandate to support diversity and artistic excellence in music, dance, and the visual arts, and has produced the free and inclusive annual summer music festival, TD Sunfest, for over 25 years now. Arts and culture deserve to be accessed by all. It is my honor to have been given the task of wrapping up the very first digital edition of Global Toronto 20, or GT20, conference. I want to congratulate the entire Small World Music and GT20 team, advisory committee, producing, community, and international partners, fellow jury members, and amazing showcasing artists. I think over the last few months, those of us who have put together any kind of digital event know that there is way more work involved in these types of events than anyone would ever expect. And to have accomplished what GT20 did this past week deserves nothing less than a standing ovation. What a truly amazing program that I don't even think their team imagined the impact and the historical firsts when they were putting this all together. GT20 set out with two main themes: acknowledging opportunity and envisioning the future, supported by its three fundamental principles: sustainability, equity, and accessibility. With these themes and principles in mind, GT20 put together the following. Nearly 30 professionals from across the African continent, led and gathered by Doa Doa, East African Performing Arts Market, got together to discuss the challenges of the times and future plans. The very first Asia Music Summit, which has been a project in the making for many years, which gathered 45 industry professionals from 24 countries, strengthening bonds and connecting us to wider audiences around the world. The first ecosystemic meeting of 18 Colombian music industry professionals working to keep arts and culture alive despite the many challenges in their country. We discovered also the block booking networks of North America. We spotlighted artists instead of just a showcase. What a fabulous and innovative way of adapting to this new digital format. Congrats to the artists for creating engaging programs. So in total, 5 days, 53 events, 20 spotlights, 50 panelists, and over 800 participants representing 73 different countries. And those are only the quantitative results, not counting the resulting themes and social impact of what these represent. But let me try and summarize some of this for you. And by no means do I mean to represent all lived experience and identities, but I will try to talk to you about what I saw. We've all gone to conferences and other music meetings, coming out feeling good about ourselves, thinking we've seen new and innovative bands, we've met fantastic and interesting people, we had fruitful business talks, we had fun with old friends, and perhaps learned about ambitious projects happening around the world. I think we can all agree, meeting digitally in this format, it's not the same. It's not the same as all of us flying to one location and feeding off collective energies and celebrating life. However, in this new imagined format, I think I can speak for many of us that we didn't realize exactly how much we needed this. This connection at GT20 was fruitful, informative, and inspiring. And most importantly, It provided us the opportunity to have difficult and necessary conversations in a safe and accepting space. Over and over, this has been the feedback that GT20 has received this past week. As a woman of color, I want to acknowledge this aspect in particular. The past few months, with the global pandemic that has affected us all, as well as the civil and social movements and uprisings happening in our very own backyards, to find a space where we can discuss openly the professional, personal, and emotional toll that this has taken on us has been therapeutic and has given us all a sense of unity. Our togetherness has been reinforced. This worldwide turmoil has made us question our supposed normal and ask, how do we move forward? We began this week with Allison speaking to us in her powerful keynote speech about equity. She said, we need to face down whiteness and white supremacy in cultural policy, and we need to demand equity and reparations. That was incredibly powerful and set the tone for the week. In search for equity, the need to hit reset has been emphasized repeatedly. There seems to be a synchronicity of what we're all feeling in the renewal of our strength. We've heard that artists and BIPOC-led institutions are tired. We're burnt out. We are tired of constantly having to justify our existence, our mandates, and our identities. After all, as we operate in a system with different values, it means that there's a larger expenditure of our energy. But I want to applaud the brave panelists that still managed to find the energy that reverberated through us all as they called out injustice of white institutions and systems in the fight to preserve art and culture. Let that settle in for a second. In the words of Ben Okri, there is no exhaustion where there is much to be hoped for, much to work towards, and where the dreams and sufferings of our ancestors have not been realized or redeemed. We will always find a way, through war, through pandemic, through financial instability, through uprisings and social movements. To quote the strong women from the protest panel earlier this week, we were gifted with the task of perseverance. We've all been conditioned by our capitalist systems to glorify the hustle, the glorification of being stressed, busy, away from our families. And I'd like to propose something that has been brought up many times throughout this conference. Let us take this moment of turmoil and pause as a time to reset. Let's focus on our self-care, a return to our roots, and return to our values. Our wise elder, Pauline Schert, blessed this conference with the advice to return to the water and to appreciate our surroundings. These times of change are trying to teach us to be patient, to appreciate our surroundings, to acknowledge and to take care of our environment and each other. Take care of your health, of your heart, so that you can last longer and be stronger, repair and heal any ancestral trauma. And while we know that the time for change is now, we do need to be patient and intentional with our approach. And while it is a time to reset, go back to nature, go back to water, go back to earth, it is also a time to be creative and to reorganize ourselves. We need to be intentional with our approach to ensure the sustainability of our work. Our intent as an industry is always to keep art and culture alive. At least that's what we set out to do. But somewhere along the way, confined by the capitalist and monoculture that surrounds us, we either lost sight or have been blocked far too many times. But it's now the time to get into good trouble. Artists are urged, don't lose hope, stay creative, find ways to stay relevant. And to the women in particular, I say to you, own your power. There's no more room for imposter syndrome here. Just look at your female colleagues who presented this week. In no way do any of us doubt their validity, their strength, and their belonging. Remember that self-love is a political act in and of itself, and stating what you want in life is not only a manifestation, but is also a form of protest. So own it. There have been a few repeating images throughout the week. Boxes, tables, gates. All very rigid, with a beginning and an end, straight-lined. But I ask, does it need to be a table? Do we need to be enclosed within the constraints of a box? These rigid lines are largely anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-2S LGBTQ+, and ableist. The notion that we should be keep putting ourselves in and checking off boxes is no longer acceptable to me. In the words of Taiwo Ba earlier this week, it is time for white institutions receiving funding to justify their whiteness and impact to their community. Let's stop asking culturally diverse and representative organizations and artists as to how they can positively affect the community. Let us ask what harm is being spread with continuing to promote the colonizer culture. It is our time to tear down those gates and those gatekeepers. Through GT20, we were introduced, or so many of us were introduced to Safe Muse and their tireless dedication to helping persecuted artists. Artists are always at the center of social movements. As presenters, managers, agents, and other players of the music ecosystem, we may forget exactly why it is that we do what we do. As much as it is to provide entertainment, the sector in which we are in is to provide music with a message, music as a vehicle to bring people together and to bring a collective awareness to the issues happening around the world. Or as some delegates put it, music is the Trojan horse for revolution. Therefore, there needs to be a willingness on our behalf and a vulnerability and risk-taking when it comes to presenting music. To my fellow North American presenters and arts professionals, if you attended the African, Asian, and Colombian summits, you know that we have a lot to learn from these other continents. The need for cultural diversity in positions of leadership, as well as generational diversification, is direly needed. One of the most important takeaways that I took from the first Asia Music Summit, to paraphrase Umair, is that Asians took the stage and talked about themselves. And it was about time that they didn't have other gatekeepers representing them. Let's applaud that. So let's start amplifying, collaborating with, and supporting the organizations that have a deep understanding of what programming will truly resonate within their communities. BIPOC-led institutions and organizations are often in a constant struggle to survive in a system that is structured against them in terms of funding and other resource allocation. So it's time to stop competing by exclusion and start bettering each other by evolving and collectively sharing information. We need to acknowledge our shared responsibility in sharing information and asking the right questions. What culture is it that we want to preserve and to protect? We need to stop applauding the already established large institutions that represent white culture and start celebrating the smaller, nonprofit, long-standing organizations that have dedicated themselves to the risk of breaking down and overcoming these barriers that these larger institutions now benefit from. They now have that luxury to present, well, I say luxury in quotes, to present a diverse program because they know it's no longer a risk. So let us shed light on these BIPOC-led organizations that are dedicated to represent underrepresented and marginalized communities, genres, and artists. Let us continue to community build. Let us prioritize putting the audience in front of the artist and stop with the commercialization of arts and culture, because this is not where true cultural empowerment lies. As stated this week, it seems we are immature in understanding of how cultural power is created in Canada. As pointed out in the Palatable for Who workshop, when power is transferred, when the reins are given up, the amount of young BIPOC artists and communities that will be influenced and empowered is immeasurable. There is a need for collaboration. A lot of the success of GT20 can be said to come from the fact that they brought in and consulted so many different partners. This is something to be admired. Again, this collaboration, this consulting with the industry partners to assess needs and wants, adapting when given feedback, as opposed to prescribing what they thought would work, this is why this conference was so successful. The hope is not to be at GT30 and still be discussing the needs of these very same topics. As Dalton Higgins pointed out, let's not have the data that we collected this week to sit on a bookshelf collecting dust. Institutions have co-opted the language of progress and put them into their policies and procedures and mandates, but not put them into practice. Words and acknowledgements are useless if there's no meaning or action behind them and beyond them. Whereas we still need to answer some questions around the practicality, the nuts and bolts of how we all do this, we needed some guidance on direction. And I feel that GT20 was the catalyst for this. And if there are attendees and contributors of this conference that feel called out right now, then my GT20 organizing friends, kudos to you. You've done your job. And let's be clear. This is in no way canceling those who feel called out. It's about calling you out to join the collective liberation of racial justice. So what do we do next to take collective action? That's the big question, of course. So let's continue the conversations. So many of us were left with a thirst for more. An hour seemed way too short, and we were left only scratching the surface. And this feeling would be correct. We have all gathered and are now aware that we share so many concerns, frustrations, and issues with the industry that existed pre-pandemic. Now, we know that we're not alone and that we all desire more. So, apart from continuing the conversations, preach to the not yet converted. We are all now converted if we were at this conference. And for those of you who do not want to listen, step aside and give up your power. Ask the question, who is benefiting from what you do? Who isn't? Who is accessing your venue, your event, your performance? Is it truly accessible? Push further in your cultural advocacy. Many presenters, agents, and arts professionals have been asked or taken a seat at funding agency jury tables. These same funding bodies should ask white applicants to acknowledge the impact of them applying and to speak to their whiteness in the proximity of their work they want to create. Let us transform this into a collaborative and engaging circle. The exclusionary practices of our industry no longer have a place in the future. Collaborate. We have all lost so much during these difficult times. The need to pool our knowledge and resources together has never been greater. We're all in this together. Presenters, let's continue to share information and collaborate on supporting artists, especially in this digital age. One of the beautiful products of these turbulent times has been connecting digitally, sharing information and encouraging participation and engagement. This doesn't have to stop, and in fact, should continue further. Invest in education and mentorship. Diversify your hiring practices and programming choices. If you can't find them right away, mentor. There is no room for excuses that no one applied. Go out, find them, and be ready to adapt and change your organizational structure in order to do so. And most importantly, rest. Rest your mind, dream, be creative, live in hope. GT20 represents hope, hope for the future, hope for the artists, and hope for the entire ecosystem of our industry. We have broken down barriers and borders through these digital interfaces and now have a charge to move forward. We cannot lose sight of what that means and the opportunity that it brings, and learn from the mistakes that we have made in the past. The concepts explored this week, they're not new, they're not revolutionary, but we need to take those tools for our own revolution moving forward. So to quote and to end with the civil rights leader, John Lewis, may he rest in power, "You must study and learn lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others." Wise words. See you at GT21. F the box. Gracias.